With the rising popularity of do-it-yourself genealogy websites like Ancestry.com and 23andMe, it's never been easier for the average person to trace their family tree or learn a little bit more about their genetic health. But not all genetic discoveries are happy affairs. Take the case of Drew Holmes, a Calgary man whose life was recently turned upside down by what he learned from Canadian genealogy site CanuckDNA.ca. Drew joins us in studio to tell us about his story. Hello, Drew, and welcome to This Is That.
Well, thank you very much for having me on talking with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you in our studio, and I suppose we should start by finding out, why did you decide to look up your ancestry, to trace your DNA?
Well, I think, anybody who's kind of interested in these genealogy sites, you have a desire maybe to learn a little bit more about your family history and stuff like that. And
right.
I had a buddy of mine who was telling me about this CanuckDNA.ca website that was specifically told you a little bit more about your Canadian history. And so I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun. I didn't really know too much about my grandparents and things like that. And so I did what you do. You spit into a Kleenex and put that in an envelope and mail it away. And about 3 weeks later, you get the results in the mail.
And so let's talk a little bit about the results then. What did you learn about your history, about your ancestry? What did you discover?
Well, the results were shocking, to be honest with you. When I got the results back, I was absolutely floored about the information that I found inside. I had grown up my whole life believing that I was born in Calgary. But the results of the test were shocking in that I found out I was actually born in Edmonton. And I remember exactly where I was when I opened that envelope. I was coming home from work, and I was walking down at plus 15 in Calgary, which I absolutely adore. I've been doing that my whole working life. And my knees just got weak as soon as I read that word, Edmonton. And it said, in big, bold letters, Drew Holmes, born in Edmonton, 1987. And I remember just sitting there on a bench in that plus 15 and feeling so alone and feeling that my whole life had become a myth to me and that I had been living a lie, and the shame and embarrassment that I felt going home that night and to tell my wife. And I'll never forget the look on her face as she started to cry and said, "I don't know who you are." And she left and she went and stayed with her sister that night.
But, from the outside, is there really that much of a difference? I mean, making this discovery, did it really change your life?
It absolutely did. My whole life got turned upside down, mostly because of an internal struggle I was having. There was like a storm had just erupted inside of me because you don't know anything about who you are. Identifying as a Calgarian, as I said, everybody knows me as Mr. Calgary. I even have a tattoo of the Calgary Tower on my shoulder. That's how proud I am to have been born and from this city. My marriage, obviously, as I just told you, started to fall apart as my wife could no longer trust me. She was a Stampede Queen in...
What year?
1991. Huh. So she has Calgary running through her, and for her to discover that she's married a guy that was born in Edmonton has been very hard on her and our friends. I've had several friends kind of abandon the friendships that they had formed with me. My work is not necessarily comfortable with having me work there anymore.
Because you're from Edmonton?
Because I'm born from Edmonton.
In making this discovery, have you tried to sort of reach out and find a little bit about your Edmonton roots?
I have, and I've come to terms with the fact that this is something that is a truth about me, and I have to accept it. So I have been doing a lot of personal work to learn about Edmonton, at least familiarize myself with what it is. I mean, I'm 32 years old. I've never been to Edmonton. And so for me to, have to accept that that's part of my DNA, I have to do the work and learn a little bit about it. I mean, I was surprised to find out that, there's almost 1 million people living there.
It's a big.
It's an actual
It's
city.
a big city.
And growing up in Calgary, you wouldn't know that.
Well, it's the provincial capital of Alberta.
It is?
Yes.
Well, you see, that's something I didn't know. And
Where did you think that the capital was?
well, I assumed it was in Calgary.
Well, what would you say to anybody who is interested in maybe finding out about their own past, their own genealogy, people that might be curious to use a website such as the one that you use? What advice do you have for them?
From my experience, I did it on a whim, and I didn't really think about what the consequences would be. And so my advice for people would be prepared to get results that you don't necessarily want or anticipate. You might find out something about your family's history that you didn't want to know. And in my case, it was that I was born in Edmonton.
Well, thank you so much, Drew. We appreciate you spending time and sharing with us your story of discovering that you are, in fact, an Edmontonian.
Thank you very much. Even just hearing you say that. Wow.